Hello, and welcome to UFO, Unpopular Fiction Opinions, where I take my reads and compare them to the average rating and talk about why my rating and my views on different things, there's a little bit of a discrepancy, and talk about what those things are. So let's dive right in. So this month I read quite a few books. My whole detailed list of what books I read will be down in the description. So if you're curious as to what I'm reading, you can look and see. Caveat, I do listen to audiobooks, read on my e-reader, and then also read physical books. So I am able to get through audiobooks pretty quickly and listen to them while I'm at work. So I am able to read or listen to, consume, if you will, a lot of books. So the books that I'm going to talk about in this video are just ones that there is a discrepancy between what the average person or what the popular opinion is, and then how I feel about it. So first up is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I already did a whole video dedicated to this. This actually was my very first February read. And so if you want to get kind of more of a deep dive, you can watch that video. But I have already ranted about my thoughts about that book. So this video is going to be a little bit different than my January reads video because I decided to take I had two separate categories of books. I read a lot of books that were either based in a different time period or it was a historical fiction, and so I kind of grouped all of those together, and then I have a couple that were complete outliers compared to those books, and so I'll kind of detail that, or I'll kind of talk about that when I get there. But so part one is going to be kind of my historical or history-based fiction. I feel like just because it's set in history doesn't really make it a historical fiction. That's just kind of my take on it, and I can talk about the reasons why if people want to know more, kind of my thoughts behind that. But let me know in the comments, do you think any book set in the past is a historical fiction, or do you think there should be more stipulation to why it can be called that? So if you're interested, let me know. I'd love to hear your opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the books that I read. So the first one is A Girl Called Samson by Amy Harmon. So this was a Kindle Unlimited book, and I decided to give it a go. And so I didn't really know much going into it. Goodreads gave it a 4.48, so very close to 5 stars, and I was at a 4. So a majority of people, 60% of readers that rated it, gave it 5 stars. I'm sorry, my hair's driving me crazy today. I'm gonna go get a haircut. So 60% of people rated it 5 stars. Overall, I agree with a lot of the reviews on that it was a unique perspective. It is about a woman who poses as a man and takes part in the Revolutionary War. And that's in the description, so that's not a spoiler. It doesn't immediately start with that. We get kind of some background on, her name is Deborah. We get some background behind Deborah. And it is really, it is a good book. I really enjoyed the story. I felt like it was unique as far as a different kind of take on a historical fiction. I seem to have this love for that kind of idea. When I was in middle school, I did this book report on a very similar type book, but it was set in the Civil War. Mulan was one of my favorites when I was little, so I guess I have this affinity for that. So I was already drawn to it, and I felt like it was a unique story compared to a lot of things that we see. And I just feel like the reason why I gave it a 4 is it just got a little clunky, and a lot of it was kind of dragged out. I feel like there were some plot points that were kind of glazed over and some that went really far into depth. It was an average size book. It wasn't super long, and what I really liked kind of were the relationships that were created, and her character was really good and strong, but then just some things were very drawn out. And I think, maybe some of that was that I have read a lot of books with fighting scenes the past 3 or 4 months. It just seems to happen a lot in books. A Girl Called Samson. It was very good and a very unique kind of twist on telling a war story. And it was done very tastefully, I think, but some of it was just a little too much for me. So a lot of people absolutely loved it, but those are some reasons why it wasn't I didn't love it as much as other people did. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is The Circus Train by Amita Parikh. I am so sorry if I have mispronounced that. I'm not exactly sure how I pronounce it, so you can let me know in the comments if you know how you would pronounce her name. This was one of my book subscription picks. Goodreads gives it a 4.3, so overall pretty positive. I give it a 3, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. I will let you know that like 46% of people gave it 4 stars, so almost a majority of people, but 30% gave it 5 stars. So like overall, people really like this book. And so, you know, the rest of that to make up 100% was kind of divided among the lower ratings. So 4 and 5 star reviews really emphasize the concept and themes. So like people really love just this concept of it's set in World War II and it's just this traveling circus and how World War II is impacting that business and the characters and kind of what goes on. It also deals with disability quite a bit. The lead main character, she does have polio and is kind of her journey with that. And that's very relevant throughout the whole thing and like how she deals with a physical disability like that. And also kind of like a big emphasis on like family and love and, you know, kind of how that keeps you motivated and keeps you going. And so like, yes, those are all really good things. And I did appreciate that about this book. But a lot of the things that I really didn't get or made it a 3 for me weren't really addressed in the reviews that I saw. Overall, like I feel like, yes, the book was like had these concepts that were really good, but overall like the book was kind of small for how complex that these themes and these ideas and this story really could have been. I feel like could have had a lot more detail. I really was like kind of hoping more for like some circus. But I was really kind of like hoping that I would get more of that. I've been really like interested in books centered around circus, so if you know any, let me know. There is a review that was a 3-star review that I agree with. So like, obviously this is not a popular opinion. I don't even think there were any like likes or comments on this. So I'm going to read it. The timeline jumps forward quickly, but I felt the plot dragged in parts. I liked Lena's character and the budding romance between her and Alexandre. French people don't come at me. But I had to keep reminding myself how old Lena is. She reads older in the earlier chapters. So that's what somebody else said, and I really agree with that. The fact that like the timeline was weird, it jumped around, but then in other parts it was like we heard way too much about like this one particular part in time. This person said that they kind of liked the little budding romance between these kids and then as they got older, but I thought it was odd. Like it just felt kind of out of place. Felt like it was kind of forced, like they wanted this trope to happen when really it just didn't fit in. I felt like if she just saw him more as a brother, maybe that would have been better. And also like the age discrepancy, it just made it kind of weird. And then also there was this really weird plot point with her dad. And I don't want to reveal too much because if you're interested in reading, I want you to kind of read and be surprised by some of the details, but it was just odd and it didn't really fit. And I think if it would have been set up a little better, maybe it would have made sense, but I just didn't really care for that part. So overall, it was a good book, but I would be hard pressed to really just recommend it to somebody. Like, I feel like it has to be like, I have to talk to somebody who's looking for something specifically like that. I feel like compared to all the other World War II books I've read, this is not higher up on the list. But if you're really interested in the things that it's capturing, then I'd say go for it. It's not poorly written per se. I just think that it wasn't what I was hoping it was. Overall, like something where if you're interested in, it's not really Circus and it's set in a time period earlier, but if you're interested in this like traveling show with like featuring like people with like disabilities and people that kind of don't fit into regular society, I recommend you read Medicine Woman of Galveston by Amanda Skenandore. It is a really good book. It was also a Kindle Unlimited read, and it wasn't in the same era. It was more like end of the 1800s, but oh my gosh, as far as like, you know, kind of like a traveling show with like crazy things going on, I recommend Medicine Woman of Galveston more than this book. So that was in one of my picks. My opinions on the book were pretty on par with everybody else, so I wasn't going to get into it, but I do recommend that one. All right, moving on. I have two more under this historical fiction kind of thing. The next one is Moonshiner's Daughter by Donna Everhart. So Goodreads, the average is 4.22 stars, and I give it a 3. Now, 43% of readers who reviewed gave it 5 stars. That's pretty big. And 4 stars is 37%. So, like, a lot of people really love this book if they've read it. A lot of the comments were, like, very happy with this author. They, like, love everything she writes. People rated it overall pretty highly and really seemed to like this, like, just like the story, love the story. It is very interesting. So it is set in North Carolina in the kind of mountains and very small town. That like, it's like a bunch of little small towns that are close together, more like little communities, which is pretty common in that kind of area of the mountains. It's set, I think it's like the 60s. I think that's what I remember. And it is about a family that runs moonshine. And it's kind of, they have quarrels with other people. The main character, Jess, she really struggles with like family relationships and right and wrong. And she has her own like mental health issues going on. So yes, like it is a very unique concept from like everything else kind of I see out right now. And I feel like it really did shine light on like mental illness, about addiction. And, you know, it was very, very real, pretty eye-opening. Like there were some things that like, even though I try to be very open-minded, like there are some things where I read it and I was like, oh wow, like I was able to gain some kind of new perspective from it. And I felt like it was, yes, it was a good story. And so I don't want you to think that I didn't like it, because I did. But there were some things that just don't make it in that next level for me. So like I would be interested to read more from this author, and I would be interested to see more books like this. So if you have any recs, put them down below. I would love to read more things like this. This again was a Kindle Unlimited. A lot of the books that I've been reading, I've gotten that way, and it's been a really cool way to like broaden my horizons. So some things, though, that are kind of inverse from a lot of what other people say is I really thought that a lot of the plot points were kind of odd and seemed very out of place, or like the author was like, let me get this list of everything that could happen and let's just make it happen. And there were just some things that were very odd. And like, even kind of, it was a stretch. Like it seemed like, okay, that's not really realistic for a person to think or do. And then some things were just almost anticlimactic. So I'm about to give some spoilers. So do not, if you don't want a spoiler, do not. Like if you've heard this and you're like, I'm going to read this book, Moonshiner's Daughter, skip ahead. I'll put the timestamp up there if you want to skip ahead. But if you want to learn why I kind of have some issues with this book, keep watching. Okay, spoiler time. So in the beginning, Jess's mom, she gets caught on fire. It's like very, very much in the beginning. Like that is like how the story starts off. But later on, you find out like this family that they're feuding with, this guy that like goes missing from the family because he's like a pariah essentially, like was involved in the mom's murder, and then he's been like involved in sabotaging the family. And it was just a very weird, just he was in there like the whole time, like kind of in the story throughout the story, but then just like it was very anticlimactic. It's like, I did it, and it was like, okay. And like something about him and Jess's dad had like this deal with each other, but it was like, what? Like, you're still feuding over what? Like, I just didn't get it. Like, it didn't really make sense to me, and I just thought that was weird. So it was things like that were just very anticlimactic. And then the dad goes to jail, and that was just odd. And it wasn't odd that he went to jail. It was just like, he's in jail, and then it's like this big deal, and they try to get him out, but then he serves time, and then like they skip forward, and he's out, yay! And it's just kind of it was just an odd, it was like, okay, like it didn't really evoke emotions. And then it was like an absolutely horrible ending. And like, I don't know, maybe this was based on like an actual family or like actual people, and it was just kind of fictionalized. So in that regard, I would see how that makes sense. But like, okay, so this girl, Jess, goes through all this character development with her mental health and like growth, and like realizing like family and alliance and loyalty and things like that, and then she dies. And just like at the end, like you were rooting for her, you feel like maybe she's overcoming and she is really being okay with herself for once in her life, and then she just goes and like dies in a car crash. And it was just very oddly written, the way that it was. Like, I had to read that section like 3 times. And, I'm not usually one that gets super lost. So it was just very odd, and I don't know. So that just kind of ruined it for me. So that's why, like, a lot of people, I think, were okay with all of that and put it up higher. But for me, like, those things really drug it down. But anyway, okay. End of spoiler. Spoiler has ended. We can get back to just my final thoughts on this book. I think that overall, like, it is a good read. If you are interested, I think you should give it a shot. If you listen to the spoilers and that really made you think like, maybe not, that's kind of why I wanted to say that. But if you just want to go give it a try, I will tell you that a lot of what I had issue with was the last fourth of the book. So it was really towards the end. Okay. Moving on to our very next, but last little history-based book of this video is The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. So if you watch my January reads, you know that I was reading a book for a book club. This is the second book that the book club has picked. And lordy, here we go. So Goodreads gave it a 3.63, so getting closer to 4 stars. It apparently was like really popular, and it had some, like, I think it won like an award for the year it came out. I don't know. I give it a 2. Like, I did not enjoy this book. If it wasn't for the book club, I was going to like stop reading it. I probably wouldn't have even picked it up in the first place. Like, this is not really something generally that I would go for. It just was kind of a rough read for me. Like, so a lot of what 3-star reviews were saying that I agreed with is like a lot of the twists and kind of the plot points were pretty weak. Like, it was kind of, I think there was like this concept and there were things that the author really wanted to touch on, but then they weren't really sure how to connect the dots maybe, and that's why some of it was kind of weak. I did not really care for any of the characters at all. I didn't like none of them. I was like, "Ooh, girl, I hope you make it through." Not really much of a surprise. It literally tells you it's about murder, and didn't really care if any of them got murdered, honestly, because I thought they were all kind of annoying. So there's that. And the formatting was weird. I read it on my Kindle, and it was odd. So, like, there were snippets of, like, quotes from different things, and at one point there was, like, a podcast part. Oh my gosh, that part was so hard to read. It was horrible. But so it, like, the formatting was really weird, and then it like switched points of view, and so maybe if I was reading a physical book, that could have been a little different. But the 4-star people thought, like, they really were like into the themes and the plot, and they were like, yes, this is all I needed. And for me, it was just unnecessarily edgy. Like, I think that there were a lot of choices that the author made that it was like, I don't really know that that really needed to happen. Like, you could have saved your word count and put it towards something a little better. It was kind of like, you don't have to say that. Like, it's okay. A lot of it was like cursing or just like adding in like some sexual themes and stuff that I just didn't really feel like needed to be there. So, like, if you're gonna recommend this to a younger person, keep that in mind, that it's a little explicit. Actually, from now until this timestamp up here, right here above me, it is all going to be a little bit of a spoiler. So if you want to skip forward, you can until that time, because I'm going to talk through some spoilers. So another like unnecessarily edgy thing was that if you go back in time, there's like these two sisters and they've slept with the same guy, and like they live together with this guy, and like the affair is still going on, and like the main character and the guy had a baby, and then the baby died, and then like you find out that the sister is pregnant with the dude's baby, and she's all like excited, but then the dude's wife like kills herself, and like it's this big thing, and it's like, what is the point? Why did you think that needed to be? I guess it kind of like added to like well, how did this guy get murdered? Because like that's a lot. But it's like, you didn't need to have incest with abusive and unfaithful boyfriend. Like, those two didn't need to both exist. Sorry about it, girl. And then the ending. There were people that liked the ending. No, girl, that was some stupid shit. Like, excuse my language, but that was some stupid shit. Like, I don't understand what the point of that was. One, in modern day, I don't know, whatever her name is, and the husband getting murdered, I guess, and then like the end, like they do the book together, and it just like, it felt all just like really rushed and really weird. And then in the past with Mary, her whole thing, and like she gave us this story to latch onto, and then she was like, oh, never mind, it really was like chill, and it actually wasn't a big deal, and like here's what really happened, and me and my sister are still friends. Like, it was just weird. And like, I love me some unreliable narrator, okay? Like, I am into that. Like, I want to get more into that whole realm of writing. But like, the writing was too poor to pull that off. And I'm just so confused, but not in like a good, like, sit and really have to like sit in the silence and just kind of ponder it. Not that kind of way. This was just, I didn't care for it. And I mean, it is what it is. All right. Spoiler over. I'm going to give you some final thoughts. Overall, I was not a fan. Like, if you read the description of the plot and you think it sounds good and you're okay with maybe some of the discrepancies and you're fine with just reading whatever, you may enjoy it. I pushed through. If it wasn't for the book club, I would not have pushed through. So, there we go. Now, let's get into part 2. And what I am calling part 2 is weird fiction. So this weird fiction are 2 books that I read that do not really fit in this historical category, really. One of them is a historical fiction, but it's very, very much not like the others. So I'm gonna get into it. So both of these books were books that I had seen people doing on YouTube, people talking about it. One of them, the first one that I'm going to talk about, was like people talking about the hate that this book gets and like some of the 1-star reviews that it gets. And that's not necessarily what I want to focus on, because I want to focus on what like a majority of people are saying, like the popular things people are saying. So it is, and please do not drag me if I'm not saying this right, Piranesi or Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. So Goodreads gives it a 4.22 and I give it a 5. Like, I loved this book. I am so into it. And like the YouTubers that I watched, they were into it and they love this book. And so it made me want to read it. And I did hear like there are some like very opposite opinions. It's kind of getting to this like you like it or you don't. But overall, like Goodreads was actually really very positive. 5 stars was 45% of people. So people, you know, really liked it. But I feel like my appreciation was different. So it's not that there are a lot of people that didn't like it and were like dragging it. I just feel like how I felt about it was completely different. So I'm going to read through my notes on what I thought. So this isn't really like necessarily me commenting on what others say directly, but just kind of me giving my take on what other people were saying, I guess. So overall, like, I had to remind myself while I was reading this not to overthink it, not to try to solve it. I read this in like one day. I really powered through it, and I felt like I had to keep myself from getting bogged down, because then I would not probably have loved it as much. I just let myself roll through the prose, roll through the descriptions, and just have a good time and not try to think too much about it in the moment, because I knew that it was coming. But I knew that because I watched some people talk about it. It had beautiful writing and imagery. So like, a lot of people say that when you look like, oh, the writing's really good and like I can really see myself like actually experiencing this, but like it transported me to another world when I was reading it. Like, it was beautiful. And, you know, like I said, some people were really getting bogged down by the imagery and just kind of like the way things were described, but I thought it was just beautiful. Like, you get to, for a majority of the book, you were like just following the narrator's like descriptions, and really like I felt like him, and it was insane to like actually take this brain that like overthinks and thinks way too much all the time, and she was able to shut off those parts and let me just live in it. That's amazing. Like, wow. And honestly, like, this book could literally be anything you want it to be. So people were talking about like, you know, how it's supposed to represent like certain things. And I'm like, honestly, let it be whatever. Like, this is not a book where like I could tell you what you should think about it. Miss Clarke does not just tell you it is this. Like, you know, it is not black and white. Like, this is like the grayest of the gray books that this could ever be, honestly. I feel really like it's a choose your own adventure for like people who are wanting to get intellectual. Like, even after reading the end, like, what? It's crazy. So yes, I think it should be whatever you want it to be. And like, people were like really vague about what the story was about in their reviews, and they were like, I can't talk about it. Like, I just, there's no way to describe it without either like telling you what's happening or, you know, there's no way to talk about it. I have no words. And it's like, it is so complex. Like, I could tell you a plot point, and it's so bizarre that like when you get to that point, like maybe then it would make sense. But like, if I gave you like an example of a plot point, you'd be like, what does that even mean? Like, if you start reading the book, you'll be like, I don't even know how that could be. And so I just think like this book is beautiful. I feel like I could read it many times, and I'm not someone who like likes to reread or rewatch things over and over, except for like my little comfort things. But other than that, like, I could not recommend this more. If you're someone that really needs like all the answers up front, if it like really bothers you to like not know what's going on, then this may not be the book for you. I think that it could be good to like maybe try it and see, and kind of just, because I really had to like remind myself like, okay, we're just gonna enjoy it. But overall, like, I think anybody could kind of take anything away from it, but I can see how it may not be for everybody because it is kind of a vague, kind of ambiguous way of telling a story. So now we are going to move on to the final book. This was not the last book that I read in February, but it was the last one that kind of, like, my feelings are a little bit different. It is The Glutton by A.K. Blakemore. So this was another book that I had heard about. I was watching this video about weird books because I like weird books. And so I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. I was hooked. It is about Tarrar, and he is allegedly a figure of French history. During the French Revolution, he apparently was this guy that could literally eat anything. And he would eat anything and everything. And so this is a very fictionalized version of that story. So Goodreads gave it a 3.77 and I give it a 5. Like, I absolutely love this book. And so it was a pretty big discrepancy, really, between a almost 4-star and me a 5. And I'll kind of get into some of those reasons, but first I want to break it down. So 41% gave it 4 stars, and then 5 and 3 stars were pretty close as far as percentages go. So like, it's like around 23%, I think, for 5 and 3 stars. So like kind of a cushion. And so like a lot of people are in this like 3 to 5 star range. There aren't a lot of people that reviewed it that were really like just despised it. But I will tell you, this book is not for everybody. And we'll get into that, and I'll kind of reiterate that at the end. But overall, like, if people gave it a chance, people, for the most part, liked it. I will say that I did listen to it as an audiobook, and I think that really kind of immersed me because, like, the narrator could pronounce the French words really well, and just, like, the names and the places, and it just kind of, and like the voices, it just, that he did, just gave it kind of this whole sort of air to it. So if you're someone that really has a hard time sometimes like getting bogged down with vocabulary, then maybe you should check it out. And, it may or may not be for you because of that. But I thought like the audiobook, great way to consume this story. So like I said, it is a historical fiction, fictionalized. And so it is also in that way like sensationalized and romanticized. Like Tarrar's life is just like so much chaos happens, and it, for a short time, I will just say that a lot of things happen in a pretty short period of time. So he just, it is grotesque. Like, and some people were bothered by that, but for like the most part, they loved it anyway. Like, this is supposed to be grotesque. It is supposed to be just funky. Tarrar is someone who has like this insatiable appetite, but it's insatiable like as an appetite for like everything, like food. He'll eat anything. He is just like, everything is like beautiful, and he sees beauty and stuff, and he's just overall like pretty happy despite all the crazy stuff that happens around him. He has some sexual perversions. He's a little bit of a kind of funky guy. And so that could kind of be bothersome too. So like, if any of that, like if just like kind of gross imagery, if you're kind of squeamish, like gore and stuff like that, if any of those things that I just talked about bother you, then this book may not be for you. I'm not saying don't give it a try. I just, maybe that says something about me, the fact that this book wasn't that gross to me, and I wasn't really freaked out by it. I don't really know. But I really wasn't too bothered. I found it was actually really cool. So, like I said, maybe there's something wrong with me. I actually even found it, like, hilarious. Like, I was laughing out loud at some points. So, like I said, keep that in mind when you're reading, that maybe I'm a little bit of a weirdo. This wasn't kind of quite weird enough for me, so there's that. But, like, because of that, because of just the imagery and the wording and just this, like, appreciation that Tarrar had for everything, and along with, like, the way that history was, like, seamlessly woven in. Like, earlier I was talking about a girl called Samson, and it like, I was talking about how it was kind of difficult because I felt like history wasn't just seamless, but like this was. Like, it was still talking about the revolution and things like that and giving you context, but just in this beautiful way. And overall, like, I loved it so much. I tried to read Manning Tree Witches, which is actually up there somewhere on my get to it shelf, and I had a little bit of trouble with the writing style, and so now after reading The Glutton, I'm really interested in going back and reading Manning Tree Witches by A.K. Blakemore. So, you know, I'm ready to dive back into that because this made me like excited to hear more of that writing style. So I loved it. Now something that I don't quite understand is how this is horror. Maybe it's more like a psychological horror, or maybe because I wasn't like disgusted. Maybe that's why it's not really horror for me, but that's how like Goodreads has tagged it. Like, it's tagged with lots of different things, and I kind of get like the gothic and the historical and all that kind of stuff, but horror, I didn't quite get that. So I'd like to emphasize this book is not for everyone. Not for everyone. I loved it, but like I said, I'm a little bit of a weirdo. So, like, just take it with a grain of salt. It definitely is kind of more of like a niche thing. I feel like this wouldn't just be front and center at a big chain bookstore. I'll tell you that much. This is why this is Unpopular Opinions, and it's getting a 5-star from Unpopular Opinions, so keep that in mind. With that being said, though, thank you for coming in to my UFO, my unpopular fiction opinions, hearing what this weirdo alien has to say. So thank you to all my humans. Please, as always, put in any comments with recommendations, your unpopular opinions, you roasting me for what I said, anything like that. I am here for it. I would love to have those conversations with you. So thank you so much, humans. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful human life until we meet again. Bye.